In this video, we're going to talk about a tool called Prettier. What is it and why to use it, and then how to install and configure it in your JavaScript React projects. I'll be adding all the commands and instructions and the config files into the description of this video if you want to follow along and copy and paste and put this into your own project. If this is your first time at CodeEmily, consider subscribing. I make tons of different videos about JavaScript, React, and just different software engineer tips in the workplace. Prettier is an opinionated code formatter. It supports many different languages, but in this video we're going to talk about JavaScript specifically. It integrates with most web editors. I personally use Webstorm, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to configure it with Webstorm. One of the major benefits of Prettier is that it will reformat your code on save. It eliminates the need to think about code style as much, and then when your code is in code review, it eliminates the need for the reviewer to comment about style and for you to update the style, which eliminates a lot of time when you're developing. First things first, let's install Prettier. I have a very bare bones project that I've quickly set up using Vue.js. Let's go to the Prettier website. And here we'll click on the Install Prettier button. There's different choices if you're using npm or yarn, but since I'm using npm, I'm going to start here and copy this npm install. Just hit the copy button and go back over to our project. I open up the terminal. I'm just going to paste that right in here, hit enter. This will install the Prettier package into our project. Once we install Prettier, we need to do two major things. We need to add a config file and we need to add a Prettier ignore file. The config file will tell the Prettier tool exactly what we want to reformat whenever we run Prettier, whether that's on save or running a command. And the Prettier ignore file is used if there's files within your app that you don't want to be reformatting. One of those is a folder like node modules. You don't want to be reformatting those node modules every time. So let's add our config file to our project. One thing we can go to is opening up this configuration file documentation that will help us out a little bit on understanding. We're just going to go with the basic configuration. I personally like the JSON version of files just because I think it's the most clean, but there's different formats that you can go with if you prefer. What I'm going to do is go back to my project and create a new file. This file should be at the top level of our project. I'm going to do file .prettierrc.json, and .json specifies that it's a JSON file. And I'm just going to copy this JSON of what their basic configuration is. You'll see this basic config in a lot of different projects. This is really the basics when it comes to Prettier, plain and simple. I'm going to copy this, and I just pasted that into the JSON file. And the next thing I'm going to do is add our Prettier ignore file. Let's create this file, and it's still at the top level the same way, and really any config files are typically at the top level. So file, so new file .prettierrc.json. Within the documentation, they have default recommendations, which I definitely recommend copying and pasting, so that's exactly what we're going to do. So copy and paste this right in here. This will make sure that we don't run Prettier on files and folders that we don't want to run Prettier on. We'll see we have the trailing comma turned on, which means the trailing comma gets added to the end of whatever object we have. tabWidth is exactly how it sounds. So when I hit tab, that's how much width that tab is given. And then semi is for adding semicolons or not adding semicolons to the end of a line in JavaScript. And then single quote is pushing single quotes rather than double quotes when possible. Prettier has lots of different options that you can add to your config file, and definitely I recommend reading the documentation all about the different options you can have. I'll run the command manually, and then I'll show you how to set this up on save. So every time that you update your code and hit save, Prettier will run. Let's paste this right in here, and we run that. You can see that our code has been updated. Let's add some code that definitely needs to be reformatted and see Prettier at work. One thing I'm going to do really quick is just update Prettier semi to true so that we have semicolons at the end of lines. I'm just going to add a variable, and I'm going to do const test equals blah. We see here the tabbing is definitely too much. There's no semicolon, so when we run this, let's see what happens. We'll see our code reformatted. The tabbing was fixed, and the semicolon was added at the end of the line. One more thing I'm going to show you is how to configure Prettier on save with Webstorm. So I go into Webstorm and I click Settings, to Languages and Frameworks, put that down, and then go to JavaScript, and open up Prettier. Here in these radio buttons, Disable Prettier is selected. What we want to click on is Automatic Prettier Configuration, and this should work great because we have our config file already set up. And then we want to make sure that we check off Run on Save. If I hit OK, now let's test this out. I'm going to create another variable that just says const equals testing. I'm just going to do Command S, which is save in Mac. And we'll see now that the semicolon was added at the end. Also, if I do something like this, tabbing it a bunch of times, and do Command S again, we'll see that Prettier quickly reformats our code. I highly recommend as the first thing to do when you're starting your React.js projects to install Prettier and eslint. Eslint is another tool that goes hand in hand with Prettier, and I'm going to make a video next all about eslint. Stay tuned for that. I'll be putting it on next week, or if it's already next week, it'll be coming up next. Thanks so much for watching. Don't hesitate to leave any comments if you have more questions about how Prettier works. See you next time.